I'm interviewing Andrew Barnes, the founder and CEO of Perpetual Guardian today. Thank you for taking the time, Andrew.
You're welcome.
Now, you've recently made a stir, of course, with your announcement that you're going to trial a 4-day working week while still paying your employees for 5 days a week.
That's right, yes, we made the announcement a couple of weeks ago.
In 2014, Professor John Ashton, who's a public health director, I'm not sure if you're aware of him, he was recommending that all organisations should do it for the good of public health. And even towards the end of last year, the Autonomy Institute, which is a think tank in Britain that focuses on work, was suggesting that if people introduced a 4-day working week, we'd have such things as increased productivity, we'd be helping the environment, we'd be improving family lives, even encouraging men to do more housework. They said that it would reduce health complaints, and of course there'd be happier people at work, which seems a no-brainer. How did you arrive at this decision?
So the starting point was I saw a couple of research reports referred to in The Economist last year. One of them was from the United Kingdom and one was from Canada. And essentially what the reports were identifying was that true productivity in work was actually comparatively low. From memory, the Canadian report was marginally worse than the UK one, but if you assumed that actual true productive time in the work environment on a daily basis was somewhere in the region of 2 to 3 hours. So when you translated that across a working week, that started me thinking about, well, why is that? And the issue for me was that you can clearly understand that people have pressures associated with home life, looking after children, the plumber needs to come, you've got a builder that wants to talk, you're on the telephone, you're doing other things than working. But also then there is the acknowledgement that in a generation that is very much connected online, there's a temptation to read that latest email, that latest post, to go on Facebook or LinkedIn and spend quite an amount of time doing things which you're not necessarily thinking are unproductive, but which themselves have a knock-on effect to work time productivity. And that was sort of my starting point of the journey.
So why did you arrive at still paying people for the 5 days?
Well, the next key point here is that what you're doing is you're disconnecting productivity with time spent in the office. When I'm paying an individual, I'm not paying them to occupy a place for 40 hours a week. I'm paying them to deliver me some output. That's the compact, if you will, I have as a businessman. So once you've decided that actually the workman is worthy of his hire, namely, you give me X amount of productivity, I give you Y amount of dollars, then you start to say, well, if you could do that more efficiently, if the worker could do that more efficiently, why should that impact in the amount that I pay? Because I've agreed that compact. And so my thought process was, it's a bit of a drop the mic moment in a way. You've done it to attract attention. But what I'm saying is, I'm paying you for that work. If you can do that in 4 days, why does it change the economic output equation as far as I'm concerned?
Well, it certainly has been PR gold. I read about it in The Guardian not long after you made the announcement. I understand that there was a bit of shock among your employees when you announced this.
Yeah, the reaction was interesting. You got a couple of people who were, almost cheering from the blue seats. You have a number of others who were, very cynical. What's actually happened now, of course, is a very intelligent conversation, because what we really said to the staff, we said, well, look, this is the theory. We'll pay you for 5 days. You only have to work for 4. The productivity has to be the same. You tell us how you are going to keep that productivity up. You tell us what things you're going to change. And in some areas, you tell us how we measure what your productivity is. So what we've done is we've empowered the workforce to think about the solution. So if you will, we've got process re-engineering, attitude re-engineering from the bottom up in a company, not top down.
And you're going to trial this for 6 weeks?
Yeah, it'll probably stretch out to 8. We wanted to give ourselves a bit of leeway because the intention is to digest the results of the trial, and then once we've done that, to announce that we're going this full time with effect from 1 July. That's our target.
And is the workforce reimagining how they work, is that all part of that trial?
Yeah.
Or is it? Or
they were given a month in advance.
Uh-huh.
So what we did when we announced it, we said, right, we're commencing the trial, which we'll be kicking off next week, and we said, you've got a month to work out what you're going to do. And then once we go into the trial, we will keep tweaking it. If there's some issues that we haven't thought about, you haven't thought about, that gives us time to tweak them in trial. But the idea was that we didn't want to just say to people, right, we're doing it next week. We wanted people to think about this. And what's been interesting is that we have already seen changes in the way in which the company is operating in the lead up to the trial. So, for example, one of my staff came and see me and he said, look, my wife and I are currently looking for a house. And he said, she keeps sending me houses to look at. And I've called her up and said, stop doing that. So I'm happy to look at all these things at home, but I can't look my colleagues in the eyes and say that we are doing everything we can to make sure we can do this in 4 days if I'm spending a whole chunk of my time looking on houses on Trade Me. So you just have to accept the fact I can't do that at work anymore. I know that another system that we had I've been lurking around probably for 5 years, because it was a nice to have but no one had ever really looked at it, they turned off last week with all the support costs around it because they'd taken a long hard look at it and said, well, look, it'd be nice, but we aren't really using this. It isn't actually necessary. Take responsibility, turn it off.
So you're already cutting out some dead time?
Yep.
And in terms of measuring productivity, is each individual employee based on their job description? For instance, are your receptionists also looking at their productivity?
Yes, everybody. Because and it's not just productivity, it's also then thinking about how do I make sure that the customer service experience remains at the current high standard. So a bit of that is working about how you get more flexibility around a job share or handling activities. I'll give you another example. We have 2 small branches on the South Island, one in Nelson and one in Timaru. Now, there are only 2 to 3 staff in each branch. So if one of those is off on a daily basis broadly, that is going to have an impact. So what they've done is they've teamed up so that actually support calls will be diverted to the other branch, and they're grouping themselves together as a unit. Now, perversely, our customer service will therefore go up across those 2 branches as a consequence, because there will be more people to answer the phones.
Do you know how it's going to work in practice? Are people staggering themselves? Are they taking 3 days in a row?
They have to. That's again totally up to the teams, each individual team. It is up to them to work out the roster about which day somebody gets off and when, and clearly not everybody can always have Friday off or Monday off. So we're saying to people, look, you've got to be mature about this. You tell us how you're going to make this work. Now, it could, of course, be in some teams that there is someone who always wants to take Friday and everybody else doesn't want to take Friday, so that works. But equally, what we're finding is that we're now finding, especially some of our single parents, coming in and saying, look, Andrew, we'd like to work 5 days a week, but can we shorten our hours? And the answer, of course, is yes. Of course you can. Same deal applies. And that then means, that's when we're really getting to the question that we should be asking here, which is about flexible working, because for those, mostly women, this is going to change their life. This means childcare they don't have to keep paying for. Could save them $200, $300 a week. It means they've got time that they didn't have before. It also means, we've got, quite a few fathers who can now actually pick their kids up from school a few days a week instead of just being an absentee father. I mean, I just think this is the conversation we had to have. We couldn't have it until we did the big announcement 5 days for 4. But once you've got past that, the conversation you start to have is all about flexible working.
There was some research, or in fact, a 6-hour working day was introduced to a Swedish home care organisation, and sick leave went down 10%, work happiness went up, of course, but also employee-related costs went up by 20% when they did this. What will happen if at the end of your trial, when you've measured everything, work happiness is up, all of these benefits the Autonomy Institute suggest are going to roll in, if they all happen, including, helping the environment, however your costs have gone up, what will you do? Well,
my costs can't go up because my productivity test is the key determinant, which is I have a fixed number of staff, I'm paying them already. The optionality of cost going up doesn't exist in our model. Now that may sound a little strange, but let me try and enunciate it. The problem you have when you reduce the working week is you don't address productivity within each hour of the working week. So if I drop your week from 5 days to 4 and you are really only productive 3 hours a day, you're now productive 3 hours a day for 4 days a week instead of 5. By disconnecting output from time, what I am saying is that my output is the driver, not the number of hours. So by definition, for it to work, your productive hours have got to go up from, in the example we're talking about, from 3 hours to 4 hours a day. That has to occur. How do you make that occur? So it is a subtle difference between a lot of the other shorter week trials, models that you're seeing around the world.
I'm getting the feeling that you think your productivity might even go up.
I'm pretty sure my productivity is going to go up. Going to be proven wrong maybe in 2 months. But I guess my philosophy is this. I think that you have to recognize what a distraction sometimes does to productivity. So if I'm working on something and then I stop because I need to answer my mobile phone or Google something or look at a post or whatever, I've got to get my headspace back to the level it was at before I stopped. And years ago, I remember when I was at Harvard reading this little novel, and it was all about how a guy used to chase this management guru around the world, working out why his factory wasn't very productive. And the concept was that he had all these high-value contracts, but because he had to dismantle the equipment and reset it up for the next one, it was that downtime that caused the factory to not be very productive. And humans are not that dissimilar to the factory in that regard. So my thesis here is if people can change the way they're thinking a bit and actually, because they want that day off, eliminate some of those distractions, eliminate all those little things that prevent us from actually doing, quotes, productive work. If I could do that, I'm likely to find that in fact productivity does spike more than I expect it to. I also think that if I've got engaged, happy, balanced staff, they're actually more likely to be more engaged with the customers. And this is a customer business, and actually if I'm sort of tired and a bit depressed at the end of a long day, I'm not going to be doing that sell as well as I might do if I'm in a shorter working week and I'm more refreshed and I'm more engaged. So I think there will be two things. I think we will see higher productivity. What's going to be really interesting is if I see higher profitability as a consequence of this, because you might find that the quality of output and the value of output increases even if productivity doesn't.
I bet you've never had such engagement among your staff as you have at the moment, and in fact have you had more responses to any of the situations vacant than you have in the
Yeah,
past?
we have. I mean, inevitably. Look, I've had the privilege to lead high-performing teams before. I think this of itself is only a component. At the end of the day, you have to have a business where I think people recognize that management leadership gives a damn. And I would like to think in all the companies that I've led that we've demonstrated that in different ways. This is just an extension of that. This is recognizing that there are lots of pressures as attaching to people in the modern society, and that the way in which we have traditionally structured things isn't necessarily fit for purpose anymore. So really what we're trying to do here is just demonstrate that we are trying to make things as good as they can conceivably be for the staff. And as a consequence, one hopes that one gets back, and I think we are getting it back, that same respect and engagement from the whole of the team.
Am I able to come back at the end of the trial and see how it's gone?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's going to be, really fascinating. There's a lot of us going to be holding our breath for about 6 weeks, but I think it's at the very least we've had a conversation, and at the very least we've given it a try, and I think one of the really interesting things here is it's got bigger than all of us now, and so I now have my staff not so much focusing on the internal, but a lot of them are coming up and saying, actually, people are approaching us and saying, you've got to make this work. The country needs you to make this work. So no pressure there then, but that I think is in many ways the interesting thing. There is a feeling in the organisation that this is far bigger than this little trial that we're doing, and so we're all going to be on the edge of our seats all the way through until the results are out.
Well, best of luck. Thank you so much for the interview.
You're very welcome.